It's EVE Online 2020, May 21st. I am Matty. Let's have a look at the PCU right away. Looks like this last cycle has been a high of 36,000 players on at the same time with a low of 20,000. Currently, there's 32,700 on, climbing up to its peak, which would be around 37, and that will happen in about 3 hours from now. At 1800 is usually the peak time for EVE. Moving on to Dotland, see where the action is for PvPers. Most violent systems in... Well, actually, let's start with the most violent regions in the last 24 hours. Lone Trek has 3,262 ships destroyed in the last 24 hours. That's Domain follows in second place, 2,997, and The Forge, 2,316. Most violent systems in the last 24 hours for 00 space is IVP TAC KA in Cache. That has 539 ships destroyed. In second place in Geminate is 9P40 TAC F, 236 ships destroyed. And in third place, in Pure Blind, 7RM TAC N0, 149 ships destroyed. In low sec, the action is in Tama with 541 ships destroyed in the last 24 hours. Kanaka, 369 in that same time. And once again, in third place is Asset from Metropolis. That is 286 ships destroyed. Asset is not usually a system we see on that top 10 list. And in high sec, the worst place to be right now is Narja, because that's where a ton of ships are getting destroyed. In the last 24 hours, 1,946 ships been destroyed. Most of those would be gankers and ganker decoys as they load their guns on freighters flying by. So that is the most violent systems. Looking at Killboards. Looks like Army of Mango has lost a Nyx to Fraternity in Omist. That's 23 billion worth of ship there, ship and modules. And in the last, since we broadcast the last 24 hours, there's a few more here. In Black Rise, in that same system of Notorus that we reported on yesterday with Goonswarm and Snuffed Out going at it, Goonswarm has managed to kill an Asbel, which is an engineering complex to build equipment and ships. Also, you have a Goonswarm Federation freighter, actually a jump freighter going down in MO TAC in Delve. And so that was wiped out for a total of about 13 billion. Those ships alone are worth the majority of that. All right, those are the big kills in the last 24 hours. You see a few other things. Fortizar going down in Placid, belonging to SATP Portal Division. And that's interesting. It was killed by Jita Holding Incorporated. I wonder if that is fight over trading territory. All right, those are the big kills. On the timer board, we have... we still have Nulsekinia Schulpen fighting in Cache. That's a proxy war between Legacy and PanFam. And that iHub was in jeopardy in 7 hours, more like 8 hours, in the system of 2 TAC 2 EWC. So that's one to watch. We mentioned it yesterday, or Villy did, who's an FC for Legacy. And another one in Veil of the Silent, belonging to Reverberation Project, is coming out in 10 hours. And that is at AZBR TAC 2. So watch out for those. Okay, those are the timers. Now for some of the more in-depth news for EVE Online. We're looking at the monthly economic report for April that has just come out. And let me take care of an open mic. Is that Fonsway? All right, never mind. Somebody has an open mic. I'll grab him next time. Monthly economic report is up for April 2020. We're going to have a look at that in just a second.
Sorry about that, Matterall.
It's all right. Last thing is, oh yeah, Northern Coalition picked up skeleton cruise systems in the Spire. That's something that was going to happen. And yeah, and economic news and whatever else you guys have. Do you have anything going on? Let's get to economic news. This is the first time seeing it, so I won't be able to extrapolate much from this, but you should just know that it is out. You should check it out. CCP puts it out every month, giving you a glimpse of some of the information available to players that are available to CCP, and this is the information that's available to players. So CCP has more information about economic news and outcomes, whereas players get this report delivered that's filtered so they can look at it and judge for themselves where economic prosperity is happening and where some of the trends might develop. Well, let's look at total destroyed value. Looks like the Forge is closely followed by Citadel and Lone Track, and that's why we're always reporting on those three systems. That's where most of the destruction happens. A lot of it is multitude of ships, but also cargo and the value of cargo that's being destroyed there. And in fourth place is another system. That's the first player-owned system, and that is Delve. So not only is Delve most prosperous, but it's also taken the most punishment. Let's look at, so Delve being the one taking the most punishment is also by far making the most amount of money off NPC bounties. That is people going out and shooting NPC ships and collecting ISK rewards for that work. And it's over 5.5 trillion ISK this last April. It's followed pretty distantly by Fraternity that lives in Owasa region, and they have 4.5 trillion in bounties. Then comes Paragon Falls, which I think is Horde dominated space, and they're at 3 trillion. So if you put those allies together, Owasa and Paragon Falls, those two regions are both occupied by two allies, Fraternity and Horde, respectively. That'll get you to 7.5 billion, but which would overcome their enemies' 5.5 trillion. Sorry, that's 7.5 trillion for these allies. And for Delve, it is 5.5 trillion. You can see that it's if you combine those two forces, then you have some competition. But if you split people up into their proper alliances or even coalitions, Goonswarm is way ahead of Fraternity, which is ahead of Horde. Oh, but look, and here's Fountain at 2.5 trillion, which is an ally of Imperium. So add 2.5 to their 5.5. And you see it comes out just about the same. That's a lot of money. That's a lot of ISK. That's a lot of people doing a lot of shooting. Now, why would I say that's a lot of money? A lot of ISK. So if you look at any other region that's player owned, and they're down in the, Providence is, for instance, is down at about 500 billion, 500 billion in bounties there. That's not a typical typical region, but yeah, all the drone lands are each getting about 1 trillion. So all that money making is spread out through multiple drone regions. Adds up to quite a bit. If they're all over 1 trillion, that's like 5 or 6 regions. That would add up to quite a bit. All right, that's income. But let's look at mining. This is something that is surprising, and that is Delve is mining the most in the game. That gives you some idea of the amount of security that a place can produce to allow mining to happen without being constantly interrupted by pirates. So they're at 1.8 trillion in mining yields. That's equivalent to ISK. And this is surprising to me. In second place is domain. So something's happening in domain. 1.6, over 1.6 trillion in mining. Not sure how that's even possible considering domain is mostly high sec and very few people mine in low sec. Anyone have insight on that?
I live in that area and I work with, I buy a lot of the minerals from there, and it's a huge area, very active miners. Also the time zone, we have a lot of non-American time zones, so it's easy for us to avoid code or anything like that.
So you just don't get interrupted, plus you're really spread out in that large region.
I mean, most gankers are not typically 4 or 5 jumps away from a trade station, right? They're just not. They're typically lazy. So a lot of us, the good mining is sometimes 10, 11, 12 jumps away from any, even regional market even. So that's why.
Well, a couple notes here from our helpful audience. Amar says that remember that Delve used to be 10 trillion per month. I think he's referring to, I don't know if he's referring to mining or to NPCs. So it is down. Also, Zero Gravity Banky says the null mining bots moved near a major market. I don't know if that's a guess or not. There's some truth to nullsec miners moving to high sec and starting to mine in orcas instead of rorquals. I don't know if they're botters or if they're just multi-boxers. Could be any variation of automatic gameplay so that people don't sit there and actually mine that whole time. But a lot of it did move to, or some of it moved to high sec. So maybe domain's one of the areas they moved to, considering domain would be the closest to Fountain, Delve, and the southern regions. Okay.
Yeah, because they're largely in the Kado region and Khanid region, actually. A lot of that too, which makes up.
Yeah, but domain is second. Let's have a look here. I didn't look at the others. So after domain, in third place is the Forge, then Oasa, so that would be Fraternity. Then you're back to high sec at Sync Liaison. So it's really kind of everywhere. It's just domain is a bigger system-wise, that has more systems than the Forge or Sync Liaison. And then Lone Track and Fountain. Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah, it makes sense. It's just surprising. It means there's a lot of people a lot of people getting in on the mining. Not just a few guys doing it with a number of accounts. Okay, total production value by region. The Forge is way ahead of everybody else. So people are still building in the Forge despite its 10% tax rate at 30 trillion per this month for April. You also have Delve about halfway from the amount that the Forge does at 16 trillion.
The Tranquility trade structures are very enticing to build in, and they're immediately next to JITA in perimeter.
So I see. So they take a chunk of that, right?
Yeah, there are.
Or are you trying to do a commercial for Villy here?
Well, I'm just stating fact.
Yeah.
Like, there are going to be a lot of players who are going to still produce and sell in JITA 4.4, but the Tranquility structures in perimeter are very enticing. They have not the Tranquility trading towers there, obviously, but they also have a research structure and a production structure as well.
He nailed it. I do my production summit there,
Go to
and I could.
Orsta next door. You can experience the exact same experience with lower index.
Yeah, igniting brand new, index is low. If you're gonna produce stuff, do it
No.
right now.
Between Perimeter and Ignite in IN Orsta, we also set up a facility.
That's high sec.
Yeah,
So it's safe space.
it's just it's right, but it's cheaper to do stuff there than in Perimeter. It's outside of the Forge region, and it's that system Ian Orsta is not, the indexes there have not been maxed out like the other systems.
That sounds like fun.
Sorry, indices.
Yes,
I-
indices.
The Villi before, but I can put 15 billion worth of material in my freighter, and I could have an entire gang of Taloses waiting outside that perimeter tower, and I could jump right to another production facility and land on Tether. That's why it's so popular.
That as well, yes.
Yeah.
I mean, there's almost no real high-sec ganking between Perimeter and IN Orsta just because it's like a very low traffic, low relative importance gate. So that's kind of why we put one there. I'm pretty sure we'll probably put another Sotio in one of the systems next door as well to further make life easier for people. But otherwise, it's just, we're trying to provide the best services we can.
So
There is an extremely low Concord response time. They come extremely quickly, so it takes a lot more to do any ganking, and that's only relevant if you're going between systems. If you're staying inside system, so let's say in Perimeter, you're going tether to tether, and the chance of gank is 0.
It's important to remember as well, if you undock from a Sotio, warp to a gate, and jump, the only opportunity they have to scan you and then gank you is on the gate as you jump in, right? And usually high-sec gankers want to scan you a jump or two out so they can prep their ganks, etc., right? It's really actually, as long as you're within one jump, usually it makes it doable. Obviously, the Jita perimeter gate is not an option because that gate is always covered, and the undock of Jita is heavily watched.
yeah,
Upshot: don't produce in Jita 4.4.
No,
right.
don't.
But people still are to twice as much as anywhere else.
It's always convenience.
Yeah, all the materials are there. You just need to buy all and build, but you're not going to make a profit. So it's for people that aren't really out to make a profit. They're just out to get a thing. But if you want to make a profit, you'll need to move to a lower index where you pay less in system-wide taxes so that you could build stuff. And that's what Villi is offering, I guess, with the Tranquility trading outfit. What systems are you in then? Because I was confused about that. You have
Perimeter, IN Orsta, Ignatian.
Wow, those three that are connected. So that whole industrial tri-system complex. Pretty cool.
Well, it's long-term planning, right? So we built the Ignatian reactor with we put IN Orsta down first, but we understood it was going to come with the Ignatian plan later, with the intent of people being able to react their stuff in Ignatian, take the reacted product into high-sec in IN Orsta, and they'll turn those reacted materials into advanced components, which then they can turn into ships or whatever in either Perimeter or IN Orsta, although the IN Orsta Sotio still needs a component rig. But the goal is just to create a seamless flow of industrial activity that is so much more convenient and how do I put this, efficient, that literally if you're paying us the difference in taxes, it still saves you money.
This is an example of a sovereign entity applying their level of organization to Empire space, and essentially, the Empire-based organizations have never displayed this level of organization or planning.
I'm not sure if I like that, but it seems to be happening.
You just want them to suffer Matterall and
Yeah.
have their structures toasted and pay the tax to CCP.
I want them not to say we're going to kill high-seckers until they complain to CCP not to hurt us in our harvesting efforts out in outer space. And you're not somebody that did that, so it's hard for me.
There's been no point. None of this has been about complaining to CCP. It's just been about providing the best product at the best price. In the best possible way. Like, yeah, I get people don't like that we make deals to negotiate for the security and all the rest, but part of the reason we can even make those deals is because we can enforce them. But if the option is to have some random high-sec guy try and do this, it's just not ever going to happen because we've invested like well over $1 trillion ISK in infrastructure, right, for other people to use, and I mean,
yeah, you're not going to make that back soon, anytime soon.
Well, I mean, this is a profitable venture. This isn't like altruism here. It's still business, but this is showing the player base what Empire Space is capable of. Like, people have not engaged in and maximized the productivity of Empire Space really until now.
Billy, Horde is one of your partners, right? Like, they get a cut of this. Yep. Okay, so they were just ganking freighters in high-sec like a couple days ago.
Yeah.
I think Goonswarm is known for ganking freighters in high-sec. Are they also partners?
Yep. And, to be very clear, like straight out of the Tranquility Trading front desk channel, like, our Q&A section. Do you work with Entity X? We work with everybody in high security space, and we make no apologies for the actions. We apologize if an entity is staging from the towers and attacking you or suicide ganking you, but we simply represent a safe and neutral location for all capsuleers. We don't play favorites.
Well, you can't control people. They're going to do what they're going to do.
Yeah, fine, but you're helping finance efforts to do what they're going to do. So it's the cycle of people paying for their own destruction that bothers me.
Well, that's even in a nutshell, isn't it?
That's everywhere. I mean, again,
so.
you can't say that this entire multi-thousand player organization has to just back the hell off because we're trying to make a buck. Eve is Eve. Eve is scary. Eve is dangerous. Protect yourself. They are providing a framework for you to protect yourself far more easily than if they were not here. So if some other individuals that are in their vast sweeping organization are going to kill you, then that's your own damn fault.
Well, Fonsway, for a so-called lore guy, you're one of the biggest hawks I've run into that are like survive or
I am not a Care Bear.
You are
I don't
not.
know, like, if people may call me this, but I am absolutely not. Blow everything up. Protect yourself. Hard mode. Survival of the fittest, etc., so on and so forth.
Yeah.
Greed is good, Matterall. Greed is good.
Yeah, well, look what it did to CCP. How good was that? Like, not that great.
Well, to be honest, all of the things that CCP got in trouble for that at the time were literally, they were just too ahead of the curve was the problem.
Yeah.
All the things they do now are standard market practice by them and everyone else.
Yeah, I know.
It's literally just they did it too early in the life cycle of the video game industry or meta or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, and also with the wrong culture, right? I think they might have gotten away with that maybe in Asian culture where it seems to be like more acceptable, but in the Western culture, it was like, I think they had the sorry example of Electronic Arts that put out a lot of weird ways to make money and got themselves into a bad reputation. And so then players were on guard for any of that kind of stuff. But if you look back now at what CCP was saying in 2011, it's tame compared to what's going on in most games.
Yeah. So making money is a good thing. Like, we want CCP to have all of the money because the more they have, the better they make our game. Like, they hire more people and the content gets better and the game gets more stable, etc., so on and so forth. That's not a bad thing. That's a good thing. When it becomes bad is when it appears disingenuous and or exploitative. But like buying skins, microtransactions of that sort, this is not disingenuous or exploitative. Everything is out in the open.
All right, full disclosure, Carneros, who is a part of TIS, says the Bastion is a shareholder in the TTT network. Oh, I guess
through the Imperium, yeah.
I have to like it now because I love Carneros. So
yeah, no choice,
right.
Not at all. Sorry.
Well, like I said, I mean, it's all fine and good when nullsec is friendly to high-sec players or newer players, and it's great that you do this and you take your little tax cut, and that's okay. You're supposed to. You put up the investment after all, and you provide the security after all, so you have to get something out of it. It's all good. until nullsec gets mad at highsec and says, we're going to put pressure on all you little guys and destroy all your little places to give you all your little engineering complexes so that you'll have to use our stuff. I mean, that is something that's totally viable in EVE Online. It can happen. It's just
viable,
unfortunate.
But it's unrealistic. Like,
I think so
I don't
too.
need to go kill people's Raideroos to push people to the Sotio. People do that naturally just because the services are better. Like, it's a lot more work to go to a Tatara and then a Raideroo for your components and then a Raideroo for your ships. Like, or somebody can just literally instant undock from a Tatara into Sotoyo. And they're done.
Yeah.
And then they can take their finished product to wherever they want.
You catch more flies with honey than vinegar. Like, you don't have to show them the stick. The carrot works just as well or better. I see
this as kind of like the CSM maybe many years ago, right? This example of what is nullsec interested in, and at CSM, they had no interest in CSM for a while. Then they realized, like, oh, there's some benefit to it. There's some power behind it. Now that these people have cultivated it and figured out how to use the CSM, so let's take it over. And they took it over and have ever since. The same thing happened with high-sec merchant stuff, where you had people like Jeronica and who was the other guy? ICU or whatever. Or I choose you. ICY, yeah. And they're, saying, hey, look, we can build big complexes. We can figure out the tax schemes that work, that are reasonable for people to use and all sort of stuff. And then you guys say, hey, there's real money in there. Now, Horde at first was just kind of a bodyguard to these merchants. But then you guys, Villy, you moved in when you were powerful enough and said, no, we're taking the casino itself and you guys can do the bookkeeping. But you're not the owners and we're not your thugs. So you reversed the situation and took it over. And it's been pretty prosperous. I mean, you're not making all your money back, but you're starting to like accumulate a nice amount of income for nullsec.
Wait, I mean, hey.
Who's this,
They
Amar?
have made the money back. Hello.
Hey, Amar.
Yeah. Anyway. They have made the money back over, like, several times over by this point. I'm not saying I'm saying it's a bad thing because it's too much, but it's not like, even if it's a 1 trillion investment, you're going to get down to this in the MER when you're going to see the broker fees, players to players, and how much it's gone up. So it's like TTT is $1 trillion, trillion-isk business these days per month.
Gross or net, or they have a lot of debt, right? They had to put down 2 keep stars, really highly rigged structures. That's a lot. Yeah,
but I mean, like Willy said when we were discussing this in the Discord chat a few days ago, and TTT has been up now, what, like 20 months or 18, or was it?
18, I think.
And so if you're looking at 18 months we know that ICU he made about, like, it's a little bit of speculation, but 400 to 500 billion is per month, and half of that went into pandemic Horde, allegedly. And looking at the MER, because we can follow the MER when it comes down to the broker fees, how much is being paid to NPCs and how much is being paid to player structures. And we know that TTT in Perimeter is like the big hub in terms of player structures and markets. And, well, again, you're going to get down to it in the MER, but it's more than 5 trillion now. 5 trillion is in 1 month. And the majority of that is going into Perimeter and the TTT. So even if you were to put down 1 trillion ISK in investment, sure, and you have the defensive fleet, yada yada, it's a very, very, very profitable endeavor.
I can assure you there has never, ever been a month where we've even made half of that. Ever.
Well, I mean, the MER doesn't.
Half of the total?
Well, you're talking about an entire region as if it's one station. Like, I can assure you there is a lot of market activity in the Forge region that is not Perimeter. Like, it's just...
Yeah, but it's like, what, 3% or something? I mean, look at the markets. And you had the entirety of the PLEX market. But, well, apart from when some guy puts up Atari.
That's fine. We won't debate the numbers right now because I want to move on. There's more MER to cover, but we'll just leave it with Villy's put these structures. Villy is leading a group that has put down these structures for your convenience, and he's saying, look at it for your own benefit, not for our benefit, but look at it. Good services, good layout, good plan, more safety for you. And even if you're taxed by other players, you're still going to make more money for yourself.
It's a win-win for everybody is what I'm trying to say. They pay less, we make some of that less.
Right. Now the reverse, and
Splitting the difference.
But the reverse is, it's a win-win for everybody until nullsec decides they want to do something to screw with some of the customer base of here. And it may not be high sec that they're screwing, that are your customers, but that's who they're going to end up screwing up. And you need their goodwill in order for them to use your facilities. So it's very damaging to go after people who might be your customers in a few months. I know you didn't do that, but some of your associates do and did.
So I think you're conflating things that aren't conflatable. So you keep saying that like nullsec is going to go after high sectors. Like, I have no doubt that there'll be another Burnjita, and who knows what'll happen. But like, that's not what the TTT does. The TTT is an independent organization of the no blocks that has some, how do I put this? That the no blocks, they're not going to suicide their own business to have a little bit of fun. Like, it's just not how it works, right? Well, I mean, actually, anything's possible, I suppose. But, nobody's going to be like, let's just go kill all the nullsec and, blow up our own structures for fun, right? Like, and we don't need there's this assumption that we need the player's base's goodwill. We don't. Like, and I can assure you, when we first set up the trading tower, we had none of the player base's goodwill. And, I had to make that tax change, and we definitely didn't have it then either. But, you just try to do your best. And
are you talking to the 3 to 5 or the 5 to 1?
The 3 to 5. The 5 to 1 was entirely based on CCP.
Yeah.
You raised taxes and people got upset.
Yeah, because my original intent was to hold the tax at 3% forever, because I thought that was a nice low fair element. But part of the fallout of the drifter thing was that the two other side of the shareholders, the Imperium and PanFam, they actually got in a room and became friendlier again. Because before it was like I gotta control the council, I guess you could call it, or whatever, entirely. It's like I literally set up the TTT argument TTT proposal by going like, "Hey Mittens, we should do this. Hey Gobbins, we should do this. Hey Mittens, Gobbins says this. Hey Gobbins, Mittens says this." Like, they wouldn't even talk to each other.
Yeah.
But then you had the drifter event, and then all of a sudden, all the no leaders are in the exact same room and they're working together. And all of a sudden, they're both, everybody's like, "We should raise the tax, Billy. We should raise the tax." And all of a sudden, I'm just 1 versus 2 kind of thing. So
you got outvoted.
Overall, this is kind of a natural progression. I mean, you have the players who are most able and willing to organize are going to go first to the space they can take over completely, which is sovereign space. And for 15 years, that's what happened. And eventually things got to the point and evolved to the point where these very highly organized players decided to take over, and maximize more space. And that meant this. This was inevitable.
Yeah, well, there's a couple interesting facets to this. It depends on how you look at this, because this could also mean security for players that don't want to be bothered. For instance, a Goon Swarm or a Horde ganking fleet is less likely to hit this area because it's protected by their pocketbooks. It's in their interest to leave this area alone, whereas other areas might be seen as competitors. Not that that's important now, but again, when tensions go up, so does the insanity. So there is that, right? Like, if you want a stable situation as an industrialist, you might need to buy into the guys that have the protection racket. If you want to, not deal with stuff. But again, this is like, yes, it's nullsec organization being applied to high sec income generating streams, and it's big business basically, which I feel like innately I'm kind of against big business, although I benefit from it. I like the mom and pop shops where everybody has their own little situation and that sort of stuff. So, but I
still have to give credit to Test as well, because they saw a great market opportunity that ICU had.
It was shown to them, but they were smart enough to do it. I think Vili is also smart enough to understand what long-term implications of actions mean. And I don't think Vili gives into the, I know he's here and he can speak for himself, but the impulses to the impulse is to, dominate somebody and to make them feel strong because you can dominate somebody. Like, he doesn't give in to those, and therefore his reputation isn't as a barbarian or someone who's a tyrant. But for people for groups that want total victory, I won't name names like NC Dot or any of those, or PL or any of those groups. Won't name any names.
I won't name any names. Instantly names 2 names.
Yeah, those groups burn their ability to have a wider array of trust when they go after people, to annihilate. But what can I tell you? There's long-term consequences to reputation, and Villy's done a pretty good job of staying clear of the most egregious stuff. Especially now, he's the one that's in the position. But that's the thing: you're the face. But you're not the entire body. You have Horde there. I don't know if they've done shady stuff. You have Goon Swarm there. I don't know.
If you're a nullsec Empire, you've done shady shit in some way or another. Like, you get your hands are going to get dirty at some point. Like, I can assure you, like, that's just part of the life. And sure, if you want to try and say the TGT is tainted because of that, go ahead. But all we're going to continue to do is sit there and try to provide our customers the best products, the best services, the best rate we can give it to them. If you don't like that, fine, go somewhere else. We'll just kind of keep trucking on.
All right,
I mean, if you just look at the numbers, and
just don't look behind the curtain, is what you're saying.
I'm not saying that at all.
It's not important behind the curtain. I am a player. I can access this. It is this level of safety, this level of convenience, this level of profit, and that's the bottom line.
Well, I disagree. I think your money goes where your ethics are, right? Like, that's how it should be. You can't pay money to the thing that's killing you. That's not a good long-term solution. But maybe you can.
But you say the thing that's killing you. Like, do you think the TTT is killing them?
No, but I think at a certain point...
Do you think those organizations, if the TTT didn't exist, would not be doing those actions?
Yeah. Actually, that's what I said. It's interesting. It might be actual measure of more safety, but still at the mercy of nullsec, right? That's my problem. It's we're all at the mercy of nullsec. It used to be like pirates fight pirates for pirate space, but now if you want to have like your own situation in Empire space, you may be harassed by a local biker gang in low sec, but in high sec you're mostly left alone. And that's being upset. Why? Because nullsec got upset because CCP was changing the game. It's very meta.
Well, the existence of this organization means that we can't truly define these groups as nullsec organizations anymore. They're just the most organized players. They're in nullsec, they're in highsec, they're everywhere. They're in lowsec, they're in Igniton, These are just the most organized players who care the most and have the most capability to accomplish these feats.
All right.
I think, Matterall, I think I get where you're coming from to a degree. Like, I believe your issue with TTT is the fact that, it has allowed player agency to creep into highsec, but because it's highsec, you feel that the player agency involved in that particular asset should be highsec, but it's not. It's nullsec. So you're there kind of thinking to yourself, like, well, where is the line? And in allowing more player agency over things in highsec, CCP's kind of, I guess a lot of people didn't realize that, obviously the groups that will ultimately end up finalizing ownership of those things were going to be the most powerful, which were going to be nullsec. It's just a matter of time.
Right, but I'm just saying let's not be silent about it. Let's recognize it. You can accept it, but you should recognize it. But whatever. So let's table this discussion. We can have it again later. I'm not firm on my decision. I'm just bringing up points of view, I think, and this is the point of view that would be less representative than the people who are on here now, since Fonsway is such a killer and Villy's here. All right. So check that out. I actually am impressed by what Villy's put together. It's a very impressive thing to do. And it took an initial investment. It took decision-making, quick decision-making, taking advantage of opportunities and executing well. And then also having the patience to build protection and a system of protection over a long period of time. I think all that is exactly what Eve is about. Okay, so let's move on, if we can, to market trades. Looking at the Forge here at over 5.5 trillion. That is amazing, because if you look at that long blue cyan colored bar, the next thing is about 1/11th its size, which is Domain, which is, again, where all that mining's happening. So harvesting happening in Domain, but the real market is still JITA and has not changed.
By the way, don't
So that's
forget
the Forge.
to visit Tranquility Trading Tower's domain.
The Forge, so that incorporates perimeter. Interesting.
What's quite interesting last month is that Delve has now actually gone below Sync Liaison, which is, I mean, if you go back, was it a year or 6 months? Delve was behind the Forge, bigger than Domain, and has really gone down now.
Yeah, if you take, because JITA is so big for trade volume, where CCP just takes it out and produces a second graph, and that's what we're looking at now. This is a second graph, and you can see the Domain, again, which is 1/11th what JITA was doing, is skyrocketing over the other groups. And Amar brings up a great point. Sync Liaison has been has been invested in as a marketplace by Ash Jarathi and some of his Abyssal, or is it Malro group that
Convocation of Empyreans.
Right. The whole thing is Convocation of Empyreans. And they've put some effort into Sync Liaison, but really these other guys, I think Eden Trade, I think, has put a lot of effort into there. I think other people have put in effort. So Sync Liaison has come up as a marketplace, and it has surpassed Delve, which was the only player-made marketplace in the heart of the Imperium, which is over, their trading volume is well over 20 trillion. So it's a tremendous amount. But Sync Liaison is back. That is surprising, because it was really anemic for a while.
Yeah, we've been putting a concerted effort into spinning up the Dodixie market, which has been pretty lax for a long time. Triglavian stuff is obviously like a good starting point. There's a lot of demand for it. Our organization happens to collect a lot of that stuff and produce it, but we're expanding that into the most used, Tech 2 modules as well. More to come.
So you guys are actively putting some effort into Sync? Into Dodixie?
Dodixie specifically, yes.
Mm-hmm. Who else is in there helping out with that, inflating the orders and putting stuff on the market?
Like other organizations? I'm unaware of any other organizations that are putting a concerted effort into Dodixie or Sync Liaison.
So you're not doing it with help. You're doing it by yourselves, and other people might be helping, but they're doing it by their own selves. In other words, you're not doing it as a group. Beyond,
not as like a cartel per se.
Yeah. Okay.
But Villy, weren't you guys putting down a keep start in Sync Liaison Lowsec as well?
Yeah,
for future super trading.
Ignoitin is in Sync Liaison, but it is on the other side of Lowsec, so it's harder to get to from Dodixie. So I don't think it'll be a competitor to Dodixie. And also, I think the Keepstar is meant for trading specific items like super capitals that can't land in perimeter. They can only land in Lowsec. And I
so there's going to be no comparison between Dodixie and Ignoitin. They're just different functions. Mm-hmm. Ignoitin will be kind of a Lowsec trade hub, but Dodixie is where people are going to go to engage in, their daily activities, their main trade, etc. I'd actually be really curious, because my understanding is there's a group actively trying to push the market there, correct?
Yeah, that's what we've been discussing.
Yeah, and that group, what have they put down in terms of structures?
No structures right now. It's literally the player, the NPC Dodixie that used to be popular, just as, Amar and Jita,
Can you
etc.
play Citadels in Dodixie?
I am uncertain.
No, you can't.
Oh, never mind.
It's
then.
considered
Okay.
one of the 4 or 5 market hubs where you can't put any structures down.
Yeah,
That's a shame.
main trade hub, and it's also it's a NPC station controlled by the Federal Navy, and it's also a mission hub at the same time.
Yeah. I was trying to look for that. I guess NPC kills, right? Like, let's look at NPC kills Delta, not Delta, 24 hours. And you can see, like, right around Dodixie, which is, I'll light it up for you.
Yeah, because it's a mission hub. People only go there to run missions and stuff like that for the Federal
Yeah.
Navy because
So
of the LPC.
you can see that Dodixie offers, I think there's like level 4 security missions, which pay pretty well. And you can take those on in nearby systems and get back to Dodixie. So Dodixie feeds a lot of missioners, the people that are running missions. So there's a lot of equipment in there for them. And they go out and they run these missions over and over and over again, making money. And that's why Dodixie became such a prominent hub. It was one of the top 4 hubs in the game. Jita became a prominent hub for the same reason. Lots of good missions and lots of equipment for your missions in that area.
It's also on that side of Uedama.
Well, this is even before. Well, I don't remember.
Oh, I'm saying as of now, like,
yes.
one of the strengths of that system being a trade hub and having actual transactions happening there is that people in that area of space would not want to have to travel through Uedama with their stuff after getting it from Jita. So it's not just the distance; it's the specific danger.
Yeah, it should be said too. This was, I think, Dodixie sits 17 jumps away from Jita, the main trade hub. So if you run low on supplies and they don't have Dodixie, you got to jump 17 jumps to go get it. Amar didn't
15.
have that problem. What's that?
15.
15.
Well, the thing I think he's trying to highlight that is most important to talk about here is the paths between these big trade hubs. There's obviously the distance in terms of gate jumps, but the risk of suicide ganking in some of these kind of suicide gank lanes is so high that it like really allows the trade hubs to grow more than any other factor, I would think.
Yeah.
The likelihood of getting ganked between Amar and Jita when you go through Niarja in that area is incredibly high because there's no real way between those two areas without going through Niarja effectively almost.
Yep,
And
those are chokes.
Much the same with Uedama, I think you brought up, which is another one of those really high suicide gank alleys. And that really helps the smaller trade hubs develop because it forces people to go there, or, you can bring your goods to Jita 1 billion ISK at a time kind of thing.
Yeah, and there's potentially even more impetus for these individual trade hubs growing with Invasion Chapter 3 with security status changes. These routes may become effectively impassable.
Well, that's where I was going with the distance and also the danger. You can take a shortcut from Dodixie, but it'll cost you in danger, right? You'll have to go through some low-sec areas that are nicely camped. So you want to go the long route, which is 15 jumps, not 17. And 15 jumps is a long time to go and get something. It might dissuade you from doing it. Amar doesn't have that problem. Amar is 9 jumps from Jita, so it's much quicker. But it also is very dangerous. If you're at the keys, you should be able to survive that. However, 9 jumps isn't something you want to autopilot to because it's not that long. So the point is that may all come
Please
crashing
don't
down.
autopilot.
That may all come crashing down with the changes that are coming on the 26th as the map will, between low sec and high sec will change on a more permanent basis. So we'll see. This is all up in the air. There's some stuff that's happening that's making trade hubs away from Jita more viable. Not only the tax situation and the broker situation has changed, but also the actual geography of the trade routes is going to change, and that hasn't changed for 15 years. It's going to be very interesting.
They're effectively, with security status changes, they're kind of making space bigger, because right now space is very small. It's very easy to get around. You just go, and if you're careful and you're wise, then you're pretty much not going to die. But this may very well change very soon.
Yeah, and again, you don't want to be the first person to figure out you're in a low sec system. What happened here? You know.
Well, I don't know exactly what the plan is, so I can kind of speculate, but it's entirely possible you could have situations where the empires are entirely cut off from one another.
Yeah. And now you have a lot more culture. Now it matters where you pick to live. That would be great.
It's worth noting that there were text strings indicating that effective security status, may very well drop to null, 0.0. Not just low sec.
Yeah, it's a possibility.
Very serious. Like the face of space is definitely about to change, and we don't know exactly how.
Well, we'll find out 26th. Okay, back to MER and let's wrap up.
But may I just point out one interesting thing about Delve? A year ago, before the blackout, in May 2019, Delve had a trading value that was around 43 trillion, compared to 70 now. That's a really massive drop in terms of trading value in Delve.
Yeah. So they have cooled off that machine, is what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, for a long time, everyone was talking about, well, we knew for sure that Delve had a lot of players doing mining and drafting, etc., and really a massive economy. And I don't know the reasons as to why, all the implications of it, but it's really interesting to see it dropped from being at that level, 43 trillion is traded monthly, down to, what was it, 17 or something, 16. That's massive. That's 1/3 really.
I could kind of, part of that might be down to the fact that I believe Carneros kind of hinted at it a while ago, but a lot of the server instabilities cause a lot of issues with being able to mine the I think it's the 90-day cycle of the various different moons that we have around. So I believe that could have been could be part of the reason, because obviously it needs, all that ore needs to be mined out, and if it can't, then they generally tend to go to waste. And then that ore is not, refined and then put onto the market.
Yeah, but we also had a similar number. It was slightly higher in March, but we didn't have as many. Did we have DDoS in March as well?
I don't have the capability to go back to March right now. I would have to dig it up. But let's.
It's just an interesting development, really.
But I know that the server instability definitely screwed with a lot of the locust fleets coming out of Delve, for sure.
Yeah, but that's okay. Well, we'll check that out. Again, we're seeing this for the first time, just released a few hours ago, so we haven't had a chance to analyze it, compare it to previous numbers. So we could do that and see if there's a difference. And if there is a difference, maybe it's explained by disconnects through DDoS, allowing players to enter into a situation that's way too risky to pilot your expensive harvesting ships.
Carnero said that they lost an entire locust fleet opportunity in April.
They lost the opportunity, but the opportunity is based on not wanting to risk it. It's not that the servers are down, but they might go down.
Well, they might have been down, they might have been too much risk, but whatever it was, they were unable to harvest those resources that time.
Right. Okay. But we'll look at that stuff. What I'm looking at now is this is where most of the jumps happen in the game, and you can see there's a ton of jumps happening, mostly in the core of the empires. And this may be what CCP is trying to disrupt. It's like so many jumps are happening essentially between, it's Lone Trek, the Forge, Citadel. Well, actually, Domain is actually not super populated. Well, there goes that theory.
Maine is not typically popular because the population's so spread out.
As far as jumps. Yeah,
40% of HiSec, I think, is the MER area, so that's why it's so spread out.
Now we're looking at PCU. This is players concurrently on. This is where players on at the same time. The giant spike in the middle is clearly Forge. I mean, it's usually like 1,000 to 2,000 players constantly on in that system alone. But look at Pureblind and Deckline. There's a lot going on there as far as people being on at the same time. Those are some of the fleets clashing in Pureblind.
Keep in mind, this is the peak, not the average.
Right. So the peak. So we don't know what time zones these are. This is just how densely populated a place gets at any one time. Look at Cache. Cache has a lot going on too.
Generally, the peak of time zones is, between 1600 and 1900 Eve time.
Right, of all time zones. So the Spire has a lot of people that log in at one time, and then the South. So those are your areas. You know what is not populated? Cador, Canid. Like, there's just not a lot of people at one time there. Iridia. Like, Amar is a desert. Genesis. We've always known Genesis.
Amar is Amar Empire contains just a larger raw number of systems than the other empires, and a lot of that happens to be low sec. A lot of it happens to be kind of out of the way.
So it's important to note that you say, but here's the thing that to me is one of the core issues is that there's no real reason for people to go live in Canid spaces.
Not really.
No, right? Like, as far as I'm tracking, there isn't. And to me, that's definitely one of the main issues that EVE has as a game, is that especially in high security space, there's just, why do I want to go live in Sing Liaison? Why do I want to go live in Canid?
Well, most of the players that live there, it's whim. It's, I like it here. It's the other people aren't here, therefore I am. Or
well, I would say it's much more the corporation I joined lives here because the CEO chose this location, and that's what causes people to even go to those areas.
Right. Well, it's someone's whim, maybe not mine, maybe my CEO's, but like, there's no concrete I can make the most here, I can maximize this, or we like this positioning because of whatever. It's just, this is what got picked, and there aren't a whole lot of other people here.
So you're saying geography doesn't matter for?
Well, some people want to be out of the way on purpose.
Yeah. We're looking at destruction now. So these little peaks that you're seeing is destruction. I'm impressed by how evenly spaced destruction happens in EVE Online. It's not just in one area, but it's all over. Shakeen, you were going to say something?
Well, I've spoke to you, Matterall. I have one of my two high sec bases are in Conid and in Cador space. The reason why we are there is because most of us that are there, and I'm only a 4-year player here, so I'm quite young compared to other people. A lot of those players are retired nullsec people. If you look at their employment history, they're people that have a lot of years behind them. And to live out there, you need a lot of your own ships, materials, everything. So bowheads and freighters are pretty common.
It's like where the soldiers go to their earned via that they got from the emperor.
Similar, yes.
That's why it's like, you've made your fortune and you retire to the burbs.
That's exactly what I told Matterall. I said, a lot of us that are there, it's a lot of blingy ships out there. I won't lie. You every now and then see a Marshal. A lot of the time you'll see, for the mission running areas, you'll see Marauders and definitely blinged out T3Cs like me. You'll see a lot of that. It's very common. And a lot of us made our money in the inner core, as I like to call it. And we left. We're like, we don't have to put up with this.
What's the inner core?
It's like the market areas. The nearest, for example, if you're in Conid space, the closest market is 15 jumps to Amar. And that's about 22 jumps to Jita, for example. Like, you don't go out there if you expect to lose things.
I see. Okay, velocity of ISK. This is how much money is trading hands. In other words, if there is one coin, how many hands does it pass through? The more it does, the more hands that coin passes through, the higher the rating. So we're seeing here the numbers don't really matter. You just want to see, is it better or worse than previous times? And if we're looking at a timeline here, which we are, you can see that velocity was always coming down in humps. Usually, well, it's hard to say if those are summer, winter kind of cooling periods of player engagement. But in September and October of last year, there was a lot of precipitous drop of money exchanging hands as people stopped doing things. They were probably waiting to see what the drifters and blackout was going to happen, so everybody stops. Then, as it was lifted in November, it went back up to where it was before. And since then, it's been up and down, but slightly down. And I want to point out that in March, you had what looked like a drop in velocity, and then in April, it's come back quite a bit. Now, that drop in March might have been, is that when the broker fee changes came in and the market trading rules changed? That cooled off a lot of people from trading as they were waiting to see how to work with the market now that they couldn't endlessly change their order prices. It's complicated, but basically trading slowed down. So you pick a price, you put your thing on the sale, you put your item on sale for that price, and you stick to it. That slowed a lot of people down. Day trading kind of went away. People sitting there nursing their trades, constantly one-upping each other, trying to get on top of the heap to get sold. All that kind of stuff went away. It became too expensive. So that might have slowed down market activity or trading activity. But it's recovered. If that's the case, it's recovered. Anything else we need to look at MER? This is a first look of MER. We'll get a better look later.
Well, the MPI has gone up, which was expected with the depletion phase.
NPI? What's that?
Mineral Price Index.
Oh, okay.
And looks like production is lagging behind, but that's going to go up as well eventually, I guess.
Economic indices, that's what we're looking at now. Wow, look at the MPI skyrocket since November. So, and PPI is the primary producer indexes. Is that the first layer of something that's built out of the minerals, for instance?
Yeah.
Okay. And then the secondary is the SPPI has actually dropped, maybe because there's so much investment going into the minerals and the first stage of development, the principal index. There's no money left over for the secondary index. I'm assuming.
What's interesting is that the mineral price index has not reached its all-time peak, which was in apparently 2012.
Yeah, but it's coming.
I mean, it's heading there, but if you look in 2012, it actually had a similar spike to what we're seeing now, and it peaked higher than it currently is at the moment.
This map doesn't go that far. You're looking at a different map then, right?
Here, I'll look at it.
Yeah, that's a 3-year-old you're looking at. He's looking at...
I'm looking at April 2020.
Okay.
No, I mean, if you scroll up, you're going to see the all-time...
Yeah, the full history. You're looking at the 3-year.
Oh, I gotcha. Okay. So this is so there was a close-up of this one here. You're looking at the yellow bar, and it is spiked up. It's spiked up almost the same as 2011, 2012. So something happened there too.
It's getting there. It's not there yet.
Yeah, that's a huge jump. But also look at this secondary. Is the red secondary? The principal. Yeah. So, that might be 2012. That looks like the introduction of PI. Maybe. Which has a whole new class of... Are minerals considered just minerals?
PI was 2010.
Okay.
Well, that spike looks like it began right around Tyrannus or Incursion.
Yeah, I remember that price is going up dramatically. As
Lakshata in chat said that 2012 was the drone poo removal. So no,
that makes
no
sense.
minerals from drones, perhaps?
Yes, that
Oh,
makes
boy.
sense. That makes sense. That makes sense. Yeah. I did not realize it was such a big effect to mineral prices, but it makes total sense to see that go up like that. Yeah, that's good insight there. So for those that don't know, and about that time, 2012, it used to be that you would go in, if you lived in Dronelands, you weren't getting bounties for shooting NPCs. Instead, you would get drone alloys. And those alloys, you couldn't sell those, or you could sell them, I guess, but you would actually reduce them to minerals. So it was a way of mining with your gun. That's why it was called gun mining. So in the drone regions, you would shoot all these NPCs, collect all the loot, and you just refine it into ore. And that meant that there was a ton of ore being put into the system. And when that went away, when they said, no, we're just going to give you straight ISK instead for the bounties, just like everywhere else. So Dronelands is no longer special. So people were happy because they got to just get the money. They didn't have to refine the ore and sell it. But the ore prices skyrocketed because you had all that ore that wasn't being produced anymore. So that was what happened there. And so this looks to be just as big and slightly more dramatic. So it's kicking in a lot faster today than it did back in 2011. You can see that's a nice, in 2011, it's kind of it took them maybe 6 months to realize like, oh, ore prices are coming up. And it took, I would say about a year for it to peak. And then it started to be the new normal.
If you look at the peak that happened in 2012, you can see there's some small valleys and peaks after that. But the final peak, like it pretty much remained stable, but the final peak before it began to plummet to where it was just before it started rising again, right on the Citadel's release line.
Right. Citadels come out. Mining is being developed at that time. Citadels helps that. You start to see an incredible decline in mineral value. And then it stabilized basically since the end of, it stabilized after Blackout. So Blackout really put a stop to all that intense amount of mining, I think. Or I should say mineral production, which is mining, right? Mining and refining. And now it's, but even after Blackout, look at this. In the spring of 2000, sorry, that would be December of 2000, November, December of 2019, mineral prices were slipping yet again. So then the changes came into ore that said it's going to become more rare and in different areas. And so now you're seeing an incline to the pricing or the index of minerals. So yes, minerals are getting more expensive. Everybody that plays the game knows that because they can see it in the marketplace. Minerals cost more than they used to. What's curious to me is the producers index, the primary producers index, which is basically like if you have minerals, you turn it into something. That's the principal item. You can take a principal item and combine those and make them into a secondary item. For instance, building a ship, you just take minerals and you put that into a ship. To build a Tech 2 version of a ship, you need to take minerals to build the ship, but then you also need to take that ship and enhance it by using secondary items like moon materials, which themselves are refined and made into 2 or 3 levels of items. And then those items are used to make that T1 ship into a T2 ship. So that's a multiple step process, which is why they're rare.
The process of Tech 2 is like orders of magnitude more complex than Tech 1. It requires all sorts of stuff from all over the place, multiple stages and steps, as opposed to smash minerals with blueprint, get ship.
Right. So, but anyway, what it looks like is the secondary market is down or going down, whereas the mineral prices and the principal product prices are going up, which makes sense, but I wonder if there's not an opportunity by buying higher up the food chain, not buying at mineral not buying the minerals, not buying the things that minerals produce, but buying the things that are produced by the things that are produced by minerals. We'll see. And the consumer index is the blue line at the bottom that seems relatively stable. That's a lot of economic news. Thank you very much for sticking around and listening to all of that. We got a little more time. You guys have anything else you wanted to bring up, market-wise or not? Well, all right then. Thanks very much for hanging out with us, everyone. This room got full. We had over 200 people watching the show. That's a nice Friday. I want to actually make a couple of announcements if I can. One is, these aren't planned. That's why they're, always a little inconsistent. Let me say that again. That's why they're inconsistent. You can't say they're always inconsistent because that would be consistent. We're gonna try something new, and that is like if you're watching this show and you don't understand what we're saying, thanks for sticking around. But I'm gonna open this up for questions. If you have ask me anything, or tell me about your issue that you have in EVE Online, whatever it is, however small it is. Come into the station and ask the questions on air, and we'll kind of go through it. So if you're thinking about, I don't really know how to do a thing, then come into this channel and say, I'm kind of curious on how you do this or that. And then we can maybe talk about that sort of thing. And it helps you, but it also helps other people having the same question somewhere else. But it doesn't have to be limited to game mechanics. In fact, those are maybe the most boring ones, because there's always an answer, actually 4 or 5 answers for every question on how to do a thing. But some of the intangibles are the ones that I want to get to, and that would be, how do I find a good group? What group, I'm like this, what group do you think would accept me, and what group do you think I would fit into? I'm thinking of changing my career, but I don't know what to do in EVE Online. I used to do missions, but I'm a little tired of those. I want to do something else. So how do I find something that would interest me? These are the things I'm interested in. What would fit my personality? Would you say? And what I would do is do that publicly online as we stream. And so it's not a self-help thing or a Dear Abby or any of that kind of romantic stuff. But even if it's real life, I don't care. We'll talk and try to work out questions you might have about EVE Online or real life or whatever. So we're opening up the show to do that sort of thing, become more of a casual let's talk, almost like talk radio, call in, you have a thing, let's talk about it, that sort of stuff. So if you guys have stuff, show up to weekday shows and jump in here and we'll ask a question. Just let me know you have a question so that I don't fill in dead air over your head and you never get a chance to ask. Just ask, just let me know you have a question. We'll give you time to ask it. No question is a dumb question, and no concern is a small concern. So that's how we'll do some of this stuff going forward, and we'll see how that works out. It would be really interesting. All right.
What do you think of the current price of PLEX?
All right. We got a question. There's a lot of guys that can answer that in here. What do you guys think?
No, he's baiting because he knows that I can go on for hours talking about PLEX price.
But there are people who may have that question who aren't baiting, who are thinking, what's the right price for PLEX?
Sure, absolutely. And I can go on for hours talking about that.
Yeah,
I love
it. Can you do a 30-second summary?
Really? No, honestly, I think it's really difficult to get any kind of insight into what PLEX is doing now. The speculation, very, very short, is of course that the work CCP has done in terms of removing bots is having effect. Less bots buying PLEX and thus kill injectors and stuff. More players coming into the game. New players are, generally speaking, more inclined to buy PLEX to get ahead or get skill injectors and get a better way into the game and be competitive. I think those are probably the two major ones. And also the third one could, of course, be that due to the mining changes, a lot of these farms of Rorquals or high-sec AFK Orcas, etc., those have been closing down. So those were known for plexing their accounts quite heavily. And
So demand for
that content has
Plex.
really stepped down.
So demand for Plex is falling, therefore prices are chasing the demand and falling too.
I almost feel like there should be a formula for working out the optimum value for Plex.
Well, what would be some of the ingredients to a formula that would say Plex prices should be here? What would that be? Some of the ingredients to that.
I would say the median sort of ISK per hour that people can make in the game, and that has to be kind of that has to be sort of curtailed down to not essentially 30 days of that equals a Plex, because that's ridiculous. Like nobody's going to be doing that amount of work for 30 days to get a Plex. But the average amount of time that you would expect someone to grind ISK in order to in a week, for example, I would say between 3 and 5 days. And how many hours a day? I don't know. But like, if you kind of scale that up to a month, like that should at least play a part into kind of how much.
So CCP should figure out about how long would it take someone to earn their 30 days of gameplay. How many hours would be spent working for that?
Because although Plex can be used for a variety of other things, the main utilization of Plex is for game time. So you have to kind of you have to square the work involved in getting the money to buy Plex with the ease or the availability of someone who say can't work that period or can't do that amount of grinding in game because maybe they have a full-time job, for example, but they can substitute that work by throwing money at CCP. So the classic example is the kid who can play, who can grind maybe 3 hours a day.
We're all those kids now, aren't we? We're all stuck at home.
Well,
so
kind of, yeah.
We're all teenagers in basements now.
The original idea is basically the kid who can grind all day versus the adult who goes to work and comes and plays EVE on the weekend, right? And that's the difference. The kid who grinds all day, can essentially buy the Plex first, buy 500 Plex for in-game cash, versus the adult who works can come home on a Friday and just throw $20-$30 at the game. That's the kind of
in the past
estimation.
In the past, Brisk, I'm actually gonna shout out Brisk. He said the following: that a good idea for Plex prices would be around 1.5 billion for 500, because of it would be a good balance between people having to farm the ISK and then having free time to actually run content like PvP and so on. Now, if a normal Alliance member ratting in nullsec or running level 4 missions in ISEC, if he makes between 90 to 100 million an hour, that takes him roughly, give or take, 15 hours to get enough ISK to get 1.5 billion. That's why Brisk specifically said 1.5 billion would be a good amount, more or less, give or take.
But all that is based on 5 days. But all that is based on how much income you could generate, and not everybody is on equal standing in that respect. So I am
talking about normal people. I am talking about normal.
What's a
players,
normal person?
normal
That's
members.
my problem with Brisk and everybody like Brisk, is they assume there's a normal person in EVE Online. There is no normal.
You can make 100 million an hour running level 4s in ISEC, Matterall. Just
I can't. I can't. I will fall asleep doing this.
There's no normal.
It's not an issue of learning. It's an issue of being awake to do it. Like, I'm not going to do that. I'm not that kind of normal person.
The thing
No,
is, Maddle, there's no
there is-
normal, and there's a reason why I didn't say normal when I was talking about how I would go around.
I know.
I used a statistical,
Okay,
you know,
let me
median.
let me define normal in my brain, because I said normal. So let me define normal. Normal is somebody that runs
You're not the only one.
Xenoms, or somebody that runs missions. What I mean by an abnormal would be somebody that does market trading and makes billions and billions a month. So somebody normal, exploration or missions or routing, that's somebody normal in my mind.
Yeah, and this is what I agree with. KR4 says that's the number that Aerith probably gave Brisk before recent changes, and that's probably exactly right.
Right.
That's
And the other thing is the further and further away that that number goes in history, the less relevant it is, because time changes, the amount of ISK change, to various different things changes, like the amount of ISK that people can make, per hour changes. Like, back in 2009, 2010, like, Plex, although, it was like a larger Plex, obviously, versus, worth of 500 Plex now, but basically the same amount of game time back then would have only cost you what, 250 mil, 300 mil, because the value of Plex was much higher.
the lowest I remember it ever, and I wasn't paying that close attention, but it was 480 million. Was like that's the first time I bought a Plex to sell so that I could make ISK. It was like 480 million, but that was 2009, 2010, or whenever. It was like a year or less than after it was released. So it might have been cheaper, but I don't remember it ever being lower than like 480 million per 30 days of game time. Anyway, this is, Amar can go on and on about this because it's a topic that you can go on and on about. So let's actually move to a second topic that came up earlier. I have to scroll back for it. Finish your thought, though. I'm McLeod. I cut you off. Go ahead and finish your thought.
No, I was just saying that, like, giving a number, like an actual ISK number for it it's good, but it's only really relevant for that kind of that time period, and a little bit, either side of that time period. Like, creating an actual how you go and define that is a better way of being able to come up with a shifting price, or just a value that isn't related specifically to ISK, but related to work. Anyway.
Mm-hmm. The problem is that different people have different income potential. So work in and of itself is not something that you can average out, because you're going to have 5,000 people that have to spend 13 days earning $1 billion. And you have 5 people who can, because they have enough skill points, they're connected in the right environment, they have the right opportunity, can earn $1 billion in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
So,
but the idea is to showcase a kind of like a threshold as to when it's more beneficial for a person to put money into the game, or to to work inside of the game in order to get.
If you wanted it to come down to the amount of hours that somebody has to play, this is what I'm saying. People like Aerith and Brisk will always assume it's a nullsec income, whatever. And it'll always be based on that. And it's 13 hours at that. That whatever that number ends up being will be unreachable by people who aren't plugged in. So it won't work for them. Well, if you wanted to do this, let me finish this point, because I just want to finish this section. If you wanted to say, let players play 10 hours for every 30 hours that they earn free, then do it by hours. Don't convert it to ISK or to Plex. Just say, if you play consecutively for 10 hours, then you get the rest of the month for free. Okay, then now you've solved the problem. If that's what you really want it to come to, the labor for 10 hours. Okay, so I'm sorry I cut you guys off, because we could go on forever, and we will after the show's over, but I wanted to see if there was any other questions early on that we could talk about. Again, we're kind of experimenting with this kind of talk radio. What kind of problem you got? How can we help you solve it, kind of thing.
Caller number 5, you are live.
All right.
I do have to give Jurgen credit, because he did manage to bait us.
He totally did. He totally. You saw it, and I ran
He
right over it.
caused an
Anyway.
argument.
You saw the spikes in the road, and I just hit the
"Oh,
accelerator
this
and went
looks
over it.
this looks dicey, but I'm going in."
I've just seen something when me and Ash have been digging through some stuff on a certain website. Do you mind if I say about it, Matt? It's
No,
not Trig's.
Go ahead.
Oh boy.
It's not Trig. One's hopes up, but there's strings for stuff about the CSM election in client.
Strings.
Could we be seeing CSM elections in client for the first time ever?
I don't think so.
I wouldn't jump to that.
So
I mean, I don't want to jump straight to it. It might just be that it's a splash screen, but
yeah, I think it's
Yeah,
notifications,
this looks like
news,
splash
links, pings.
yeah, it looks like a notification or a login splash screen text.
Yeah,
that said,
I was
even
gonna say
that will be a lot better than what we've had before.
Yeah, like on login, you get one of those special events. Oh, CSM elections. Click here to go on the website and vote for it. Whatever.
Yeah, the strings say elect your representatives. CSM elections open until Monday. The Council of Seller Management is a democratically elected player advocacy group, and Omega accounts older than 30 days are eligible to vote.
That's pretty neat.
Can we do real talk? Do you guys really like CSM dominated by players that belong to large organizations?
No, that's why personally, I'm going first because I'm the hardball here. Okay, that's why personally, and this is my personal opinion, I never vote for somebody in a block, whether they are good or bad. As long as they are in a block, I will not vote for them. And to put that into context, last year I voted for Mike Azariah first, Exuki second, and Marol third. Those were my votes.
Matterall, I thought you were trying to wrap up, and then you just throw that bomb in there.
We're horsing around. We have 15 minutes. Oh, time's up.
Well, Z, you can't. Well, Z, you can't vote for Exuki anymore.
Yeah, there you go. We actually talked about that yesterday. Since somebody told me that he joined in it, I'm like, oh, there goes one vote out of the window.
So audience says they don't like null dominating CSM. Well, few people anyway. So comment there if you want.
But the funny thing there is,
I cut off
the
Ash,
funny thing there though.
Sorry.
Just real quickly, the funny thing there though, Z, is it's kind of interesting how you somehow feel like Z that what's his face being in initiative is going to change how he
Exuki.
approaches the game. Exuki, yeah.
I mean,
Maybe.
Well,
literally
actually,
running
I know the
because
reasons why he joined in it. I know the reasons why he joined in it. So,
So we can also see the splash screen that will be presented when the CSM flyer is put up. So it looks like it is simply a login screen notification.
yeah, like we've seen for invasions and the last few events.
Yeah, to speak to the question though, the thing about the CSM and whether or not it's dominated by nullsec blocks is that, in my opinion, the most important thing is to make sure that the fact that the CSM is a functional election should be first and foremost. And so if the null blocks win by organizing the most votes, if there's nothing wrong with the system, then I think that says something about the number of people who want to follow that, or that want that voice to represent them. That being said, I am gravely concerned about the legitimacy of the voting system right now, given the fact that individuals can hold the voting power of an entire nation or alliance at this point. So, but that said, I think that nullsec should have exactly the amount of representation that they earn through their votes. And even if it's completely dominated by nullsec, we have to remember that this is not a legislative body. This is a advocacy group, player advocacy group, as they pointed out in that very string, which means that it is not the channel to CCP. It is a channel to CCP. And if all it becomes is a really effective channel for the nullsec block to talk to CCP, that's actually arguably fine, because CCP are not hypnotized by them. You know, they understand what they're working with, and there are other channels available to other
then
groups.
call it nullsec council to CCP or something. Like, change the name of it.
Well, no, because
what it ends up being, right?
If we vote on that, if that's what gets voted on legitimately, then that's what we want for a representative. I don't think that that's true. I think that it'd be nice for there to be one or two representatives from other areas of space. But that being said, I feel like this concern of like, should they be dominated? Should they not be dominated? Like, it's not a black or white issue.
They should.
I don't agree with that at all.
Hold on a second. You should RP this, Ash. I'm throwing this out at you. That you should RP this and say this is the council of, like, you have Empire Space Leadership. Well, you should have a player run council of nullsec leadership, and maybe even some pirate factions that are vouched in or whatever, that talks pretty much to CCP. Instead of it being a player council, make it an in-game character, leaders and viceroys from nullsec and lowsec. All right, now I cut off Murray. Go ahead.
Yeah, you could say that that's in theory what is wanted, but the fact of the matter is that the CSM is informing them on changes that affect the entire game, and they're clearly currently not getting input from both lowsec and from like small and just non-null block people in nullsec. Like, literally the only reason I'm running is because when I asked people either on the CSM or people in CCP if they'd recognize the impact that X change or Y change was going to have for small and medium-sized groups, they literally did not understand what the impact was. They had no idea because they never looked. They never checked. They didn't even ask anybody.
Yeah, but that's just been par for the course the entire time, no matter what group you come from.
Yeah,
like the amount of time CSM have had to sit down and do a presentation so CCP can understand what a mechanic actually does.
Yes, but they get pretty much exclusively input from people whose experience is those large nullsec block experiences.
That's patently false. If anyone's been to one of the big events, they'd know.
Let me be abundantly clear. Like, I think that the CSM would be better if it represented more playstyles and not just was the council of nullsec politics. I think that that's the whole point of the voting, and that was my point of earlier, which is that nullsec should have a portion of the CSM representative of the amount of voice that they would like to be represented by the CSM. Like, that's what voting does. As far as whether or not CCP understands small gang, I mean, Team Talos is led by CCP Rise. I can vouch particularly that I have been reached out to individually by several different CCP devs to get my opinion or to give feedback about different things. And I know other players.
Well, that doesn't make it all right, Nash.
Twitter. No, what I'm saying is that there are other channels to this communication. So I can vouch for a fact that there are devs, and most of the devs that are actually making that kind of decision are aware of small gang PvP.
Small gang PvP is not what I'm referring to.
Okay. Well, you said lowsec. Like, one of the latest patches was literally called loyalty to lowsec.
Small and medium-sized groups are not just this small gang. Like, people who don't live in large null blocks have structures, have SOV, and need to deal with fights that aren't just us with 5 dudes going to nano people somewhere. I need to form actual fleet comps. I need to form strategies to defend strategic objectives, and all of that plays into the game and is a huge content generator. Look at the groups that are driving most of the content in nullsec right now. Nullsec Nayashul Yupin in Cash, and Federation of Conifers in Pure Blind. People are fighting over their stuff. Those are medium-sized groups. and their ability to do what they do is incredibly important for game balance, because if they can't, you lose a huge amount of content.
I mean, I agree with all that, but I would suggest that everything, like this last whole quadrant prior to this quadrant, was focused on the kind of things that would aid that sort of stuff. Loyalty to LowSec, From Wormholes with Love, you know, even the Surgical Strike update.
Right.
You know, there's all these different the nerfs to Titans to make it so they can't just flat things
but
out of
that's
the
what I'm
sky.
saying. People don't understand the perspective of those smaller groups. Surgical Strike was a direct to nerf to most relatively high skill, small and medium-sized groups. Most of the changes in that patch negatively affected their ability to fight outnumbered.
I know the development process right now for CCP is to get low-hanging fruit in areas that are complained about. And the question is, whose complaints do they hear? Whose complaints do they have representation or direct channels to? And that's one of the functions that CSM has. I think it was Wrecking Crew out here had said, I think it was that CSM doesn't really matter. And I think it does. I think CSM does have influence, absolutely. I think they're all top-level players as far as understanding of mechanics and concerns for a certain strata of player, and they all talk shop with CCP Rise when they're having drinks. And, you know, they kick around ideas. Now, Rise has, you know, he's been there. He's been one of those guys. He's knows a lot more about the mechanics than these guys do, but they are constantly comparing notes and going back and forth, et cetera, et cetera. Look at the filaments, right? Filaments is something that was a huge success for CCP, and that's what everybody said, right? Because it could take you out and you could do action on your own. And it just came out of Rise's brainstorming, probably about some of the things that nullsec people were complaining about, which is the problem is Eve is dead because I have to travel 30 systems to find some action. And then that idea popped out of there. Where is the marketing version? Where is the marketeering version of that? Where is the small group version of that? Where are any other examples of that sort of a thing? Like, why don't we put in this random thing that eases your lifestyle?
What are you even talking about?
What?
Like, the filaments were awful for null blocks, and it's designed for small gangs. Like, it literally restricts the number of people.
I will disagree with that.
These are universally liked by them too.
Filaments are very good for somebody whose primary restriction to their content is the fact that if they go within 25 jumps in any direction, they are still in blue space, because a filament largely bypasses that.
The filament is for somebody who's in JITA and wants to be somewhere else.
No, that's not.
What are you talking about?
I mean, that might be true. I don't know. It's explorers. Yeah, it kind of works for explorers. But this is
based on my experience.
I think, hold on a second. I think this was thought of. I think the idea was thought of out of an abundance of complaints that you couldn't get yourself into random action. Which is one of the drawbacks of living in a walled city, is that you're not going to get into a random action fight with someone in the wild. You have to be outside your walls to do that. If your walls are huge, it takes you a while to get outside those walls. And that is a tax on living behind the walls. And so to have that alleviated, to me, was like, well, it's great. For now you can live in a secure environment and do your harvesting and, you know, win the game that way. But if you want to find some action, now here is some relief for that. You can actually find a random direction, go in it for a while, then hit the button and then hit something and then find your way back. And that's how those things work. But my point isn't the actual mechanic.
No, this is the issue. You're rejecting the fact that it's so useful to so many other groups. Like you saying that it is for the people that are behind the closed walls, is rejecting the idea that it's
Before?
for the people that are coming out of JITA, that it's for the people that are in wormhole space, that it's for the people who are doing exploration.
People
It's
in
not
JITA were
just
not complaining
the
about
people-
lack of, but people in
No,
JITA
no,
were,
no.
Everybody can't find random.
Hold on a second.
Everybody has problems finding content. The low
So
sectors do.
before-
The high sectors do. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, that's a universal problem. It's not just
Before-
the people behind the walls.
Before we dive into guessing why CCP did this individual thing, while I don't have specific numbers because I don't write it down every single filament person that comes into my pocket, I would say that probably somewhere between a third and 50% of the filament peoples, either solo or small groups that I see, come from one of the big three null blocks. So, regardless of who it was intended for, I'd say it's probably about 33 to 50% of the people who are using them are from the null blocks, and the rest is kind of scattered across everyone else.
Thank you, Murray. The point that I'm making, Ashtarothi, is this. Where did the pressure come from for that kind of thinking from CCP's design department?
It came from the issue that Blackout was successful, but they couldn't do it that way, and they had to find a player-driven way of implementing a new kind of Blackout, and that is where the filament process came from.
That's not a player-driven way.
I don't know
it's
if
magic.
I agree with that.
Hold on, Murray.
It was.
I'm going to start muting you guys. Let me finish arguing with Ashtarothi without people jumping in over me. That is not a player-made Blackout. That is a random event generated by the game. It's not. Players haven't devised any way of getting out there on their own. Wormholes were supposed to do that.
Hold on, Matt. Sorry. The idea of Blackout was to get around Intel networks, which is what the filaments do. Blackout killed Intel networks by killing local filaments. Instead of killing local, just pop you straight into the system, thus avoiding the Intel network. It's a different solution to the same problem.
Okay, now you guys can jump in. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, to be fully honest, I pretty rarely use filaments because I made the choice to go live in a relatively content-active area as it is, so I don't actually need to go anywhere for content most of the time anyway.
The point is, again, where does the pressure come from to develop something along those ideas? That's where CSM has power. They have the idea, they generate the friction to get attention to certain aspects of the game. And I think one of the problems they were having, because a lot of people live in nullsec, not just the big guys that you know of, is that they're not having much fun. You need to do something to shake us up. Okay, Blackout's too oppressive because it ruins our way of making money. But we really liked it, right? You heard that coming out of Innominate, a CSM member. I really liked Blackout, but it's really bad for our people. But I really liked it. And I think Goonswarm played with that too. We really liked it, but it's really bad for our people, but we really liked it. Well, how do you alleviate that pressure? Because Blackout was too much, right? Tell me CSM doesn't have some power.
This has nothing to do with whether or not they like it. There's no
What are you
metric
talking
on the
about?
wall about whether or not nullsec liked Blackout. There's no presentation of the slide of how much people thumbsed up it. It was about results of player behavior.
I mean,
What are you talking about? What was the result of the player
nullsec
behavior?
player activity fell off a cliff. They didn't like it.
So
An
the whole
average.
point and what they got out of it was that, if you remember, it was to combat bots, automation,
Yes.
and deal with a lot of the
income,
the worst play styles. And so the threat removed the capability of those things and allowed them to target them better. That was the point of nullsec. And they looked at those numbers and they talked about what they liked and what they didn't like out of it and what they learned from it. And one of the things that they learned from it was that they needed some other trick to make it happen. So they experimented with things like the Halloween event where 100% drop rate. So now it's just an extreme test of like reward. Or maybe if you go into a certain area of space, it's going to have a better drop rate. And then finally, they experiment with things like the filaments, where it's like, well, what if we just basically, one of the people that were the most successful, that had the most fun during Blackout, were wormhole groups. So what if we just gave them a pocket wormhole? And they did that for Christmas, and it was so successful that they're like, this needs to be a full-time feature. Like that's what happened.
Well, that's what we assume.
I
happened,
personally am not
right?
arguing against that. I don't. To me, where it came from isn't the important thing.
I know. That's why I keep interrupting you, because that is the important thing. That's what we're talking about here, is what is CSM's version? What is their power? And their power is the power to create the friction needed to have solutions found for things that they're talking about. They create the needs, and CCP
They are a
meets the
powerful
needs.
tool, and
Yeah.
it would suck if that powerful tool was sabotaged. But that powerful tool is sabotaged not by having one representative or a different representative. It's about that tool is sabotaged when votes of actual players don't matter because bot farms vote more than everyone else combined. Like as
People
long
don't know
as
about bot farms.
as long as the voting is done legitimately, then the representation is what was voted on. And so the CSM can be a powerful conduit. It can be a useless conduit, but it's the decision of those who vote and those who get voted in, whether or not that will, which one it'll be. CCP will use it if it's valuable and ignore it if it's not. They have other conduits to use either way.
Correct. Well, that's why it's not hopeless. There's other ways that they listen to what some of the desires of the players are. Because let's face it, that's what CSM is supposed to be. It's supposed to be an advisory committee, talk about the health of the game and what direction they're going in, and some of the troubleshooting that they could do beforehand in case CCP is not thinking about something. But it's not the only avenue to generate inertia of what people want. Unfortunately, it's, they're humans. They're humans, and they can only listen to so many people. And they need to synthesize multiple people through representatives. And they do that through experts in the game. They do that through even streamers. They do that through people like you, Ashtarothi, that work with new players by contacting them directly. They work with people who are specialists in certain parts of fields. They do it through surveys. They do it through CSM too. I think CSM gives them a lot of political cover among the players as well, because they can always pin it on CSM. Or I don't know if they could pin it on CSM, but they could basically say like, CSM approved this. And I think that's their way of saying, hey, this player representatives like this okay too, so we think we're on the right track. We're doing this together. And it's a little bit of political cover for CCP. And it has worked, right? They have totally quashed the CCP doesn't know their own game anymore. That kind of criticism is gone.
I wouldn't say it's gone. It's been reduced, but it's still there a little bit.
All right, I'm exaggerating for effect, but yeah, you get it. All right, we're having some fun. Thanks for hanging out with us at Talking in Stations. We are literally talking in stations now. If you have some concerns or some topic that you would want to bring up, whether it be EVE Online or real life, hang out with us and bring them in, and let's go over them. If you need some advice, come in and ask for advice. If you want some tips on how to optimize your time in EVE Online, come in and ask us that. No question's too small, and no concern is too insignificant.
Given that the CSM elections are coming up, Matterall, maybe it would be a good time to remind people why the CSM was initially created, because there's a lot of newer players who might not know the reason why the CSM actually exists. It's a unique thing in the industry.
Yeah. Well, it's also a little bit RP'd. If you look back, I'll tell you what I know, and then you can fill in the blanks. Or actually, you tell me what you know, and I'll fill in whatever you want, Silva.
From my memory, and my memory is kind of bad because I've been away a few years.
You were on the CSM, though. We should establish that.
From what I remember, because it happened before my time of playing EVE, it was in response to when an organization had certain devs in it that was handing off T2 BPOs to players.
All right, I'll stop you there. That's not where it starts, but go ahead and continue, because because then I'll give some backstory to that.
Okay, that's my knowledge of it. So maybe you want to go on because
No, but that's the common knowledge, right? Go ahead and finish what you were going to say.
No, that's exactly it. That is what my knowledge of it was, or what I remember. Of course, I've been away a few years, so
no, that was Hilmar's. I think Hilmar does a series of. He's like a judo player in a PR way. He figures out how to make two things, how to combine two or three things to transition, to pivot, and he pivots on things to disguise maybe the real reason he's pivoting. He's done it like 2 or 3 times that I've seen, right? One of those things is that example of what you call T20. And they said, well, the CSM was created as oversight committee for players to hold CCP accountable, to hold the devs back from rigging the game for other players. That was not what CSM's primary purpose was at all when it started.
Internal affairs.
What's that?
So there's internal affairs that keeps the employees in line.
Right.
You were the one that even showed me the video that confirmed this, where basically it's not that it was like because of the T20 incident like directly, but the T20 incident prompted triggered a lot of stuff in CCP, which did 2 things. 1, it created the internal affairs division, and 2, it created the need for, or they created the player advocacy group known as the Council of Stellar Management. Like that's what happened.
Yes, it is true. That's what happened. It happened at the exact same time. So what actually happened?
Well, they put it out as a bait, as like a here's what's going to make this okay. We now have these.
We're going to pivot. Yes, and that's one of the things I was talking about. So here's what actually happened. The CSM was devised early on in a very philosophical way. As they were developing this virtual world, they were thinking there needs to be a contract between the gods, the makers of the world, CCP, and the players, the mortals. And the contract is the EULA. And that's the only place that players meet CCP. So in other words, if something happens to you in the world that's not fair, like electricity goes out, you lose your ship, you appeal to the gods through the game masters, and they make a decision, and they give you back your ship. They reverse the reality in the virtual world. But that's it. So what they thought was, at some point, if you have that relationship between gods and mortals, you're going to need a middle layer that can communicate from players' desires of the world and how it should be formed with the gods. And that was to be the CSM. And that started out before the game even existed. That was 2003. And they tried to make it workable. I think Caleb was actually on what would have been considered CSM. So were some of the bigger players back at the very beginning of this game. And what they were was kind of consulted about the game mechanics and how they were working or weren't working. And those people, the communication was so bad that they said, this is a waste of time for our devs, because communication back then was texting through Skype or whatever. And it just wasn't very efficient. So they said, forget it. Let's not do it. Let's not put a priority on it. Okay, so you go to 2005 or 6, whenever T20 happened. You had a developer who belonged to the strongest power in the game at the time, which was Band of Brothers. And I don't know the T20 specifics, but he left blueprints that were valuable, including a Saber, which is very valuable. That's a T2 ship, and those are very rare to begin with. I don't know how he got it or what happened or any of that stuff, but he ended up benefiting one team. And the devs cannot benefit one team. That's cheating, and that's a rigged game, and nobody wants to play that. So the people who were hurt by that made it a big stink, made it a big fuss. And all the people who didn't like Bob at the time definitely had an issue in their pocket to stick CCP with, and they did it to great effect. To quell the masses that were angry about that sort of thing, CCP said, okay, Internal Affairs Department, but also we're going to have this Council of Stellar Management. We're going to dust off that program and try to implement it now. And so it was dusted off and used as a political pivot to say, we want to hear you players, we want to understand you, and we want to take your complaints seriously. And now you have representation directly to us. And for the first 5 years of the CSM, or 4 years, no, not years, the first 5 sessions, because CSM was actually every 6 months, not every year. They ended up not really having much influence on CCP. That's why nobody was interested in them. They had to earn their stakeholder position. And that wasn't done until CSM 4 or 5, when they said, look, you want to hear from us. We don't want to be window dressing. You got to hear from us. And we want to have say-so in some of the things that you're bringing in. So CCP finally at CSM 5 said, okay, you guys can have a stakeholder type position, which means that you get a seat at the table. You get to talk to developers in a way that is more than just a passive group. You get to say, yeah, look, we're the client and we want it to be like this. And at that point, and again, nullsec does the same thing. They pivot on a thing, but they basically said at CSM 6 and 7, or I think it was 6, we need to take over CSM because they actually have some power now and they're shaping the game. So let's get in there and let's take it over. And that's when you had a lot of that kind of stuff happening. So that's kind of the political story of CSM and why it exists. Now, since then, it's been laughed at and people say it's useless. There have been some troll candidates. There have been some failures. They've been infighting in the CSM because it was political, and it's been garbage, just a ton of garbage. But there's also been a lot of good advice given to CCP, and so they found value in keeping it around, right? Look, the Alliance Tournament, loved by some people. I think CCP said, too much work. I know people like this, but we need to get rid of it. It's just too much of a hassle, and we can't really repair the stuff that's needed to make Alliance Tournament go. It was a sacred cow. It was sacrificed. They could have done the same thing to CSM. They haven't done that. Why not? Because they're getting some high-level feedback from players. So CSM does work, does have influence, especially in the informal capacity of sitting around and commiserating about EVE Online and where it should go. I think they form the need for things that CCP need to address. And I think they're a strong voice in that, whether we like it or not. And that's why it should be a diverse group of players that are represented by everybody, or different play styles, different player bases, basically, because this game is not one game. It's like 32 games or whatever. But right now we have a lopsided group think mentality that happens with nullsec, with so many nullsec representatives. And this is why I have such a problem with it. And I am tired of talking. Somebody else talk.
Well, I just came back from the CSM meeting, and it's like, fucking CSM members from nullsec.
Yeah,
Like,
get in here and defend your people. So you guys, did you have your final meeting just now?
No, we have a weekly.
Oh, it's just your weekly. Oh. When's your last meeting? It must be after the election.
Sometime in June, I assume, yeah. Or July, or I don't know when the elections are.
All right, well, review the tape and then come back and defend your CSM people.
I don't think I really need to, do I?
No, you don't.
Like, is it just you ranting about nullsec members from the CSM again?
Yes, diversity.
Yeah.
All right. I'm sorry. We're at 2 hours. We're going to go. Because otherwise this will be another 4-hour party like we had that one day, which was great fun. I want to thank Billy for hanging out, Fonsway, Ash, Murray, all you guys, Amar, who was here. Thank you all for hanging out, and thank you guys for watching us. We are going to see who we should raid here. I only see Marquis Dragon. Who else is out there? We can raid Marquis Dragon. It's fine. But I don't always get the full picture. One second while we prepare.
Yeah, read him.
Jules Soder. Here, I'll give you the name. It's Julianus from Faction Warfare.
One of the recent Galante presidential candidates.
Yeah, presidential candidate, General Julianus Soder.
I got you.
himself.
Okay. Thank you guys for hanging around. Here is.
Still alive, guys.
He doesn't pop up for me.
JULEF_SOTER.
Yeah, does he not want to be rated? Maybe he doesn't have that turned on or something?
No. Is that what's happening?
Because I copied and pasted from Jules Soder.
Type /raid Jules_Soder.
That's what, yeah,
Found
in
it.
the
Okay.
chat.
All right, guys. This is the guy that ran for Galente president. He's a faction war guy. Thanks, guys. We're going to continue off air. We'll see you Monday. Have a good Friday. And we'll see you on Sunday, too, for the regular show. All right, it's on its way.